Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Kicking off our 250th episode of the podcast, we wanted to thank a few people. I wanted to let Jimmy go first. Jimmy?
Hey, it's Jimmy, and I can't believe that we are on episode number 250 of the Cryptid Creator Corner podcast. I am blown away by the response to the podcast. I hear from folks quite a bit who really love the podcast, who want to come on the podcast. Not just my brother Bobby, but shout out to Bobby, the Cryptid Creator Corner's number one most dedicated fan. But I really want to thank you, the listeners. You're the reason we do the podcast. We hopefully are bringing you some really fun, interesting, informative comic creator interviews. I want to thank all of our guests. We've had some incredible guests on, in particular the past year, some comic creators that I really respect and admire, and not only find interesting to talk to, but learn from. I've gotten to interview Tom King and Scott Snyder, David Pepose, Jared Lujan. It's just been fantastic. I also want to thank Byron, the other host of the Cryptid Creator Corner, who does so much work to make the podcast what it is, in terms of the editing, putting together little graphics, posting on social media, coordinating with comic shops and advertisers. He does so much to try and get the word out about the podcast. And lastly, but certainly not least, I really, really want to thank Matt Ligeti, who started Comic Book Yeti. He is the Comic Book Yeti. He brought me in to be a reviewer. He reached out to me on social media. I became the interview editor, doing written interviews, and now one of the hosts of the podcast. And I just absolutely 100% from the bottom of my heart love doing it. So thank you.
This podcast has been one of the strangest blessings of my life. I started it in a time my health was probably the worst it has ever been after a huge autoimmune event. Now, as a disabled person, my life looks way different than it did prior, and this outlet has given me the opportunity to connect with the community in a way I would not otherwise have been able to do. I'm forever grateful to the creators who have taken the time out of their busy schedules and lives to answer all my questions. I'm grateful to the listeners, whether this is your first time with us, or to the veterans who have been with us all along. Thank you. I'm grateful to my co-host Jimmy for keeping me grounded. When I have a tendency to focus too much about the numbers, his enthusiasm for indie comics remains boundless, and he has jumped in and carried the load several times when my health inevitably tanked for a bit and kept us going. I'm grateful to Matt Ligeti, who started Comic Book Yeti, for creating a platform for lots of people and for always putting up with my zany ideas. Lastly, I'm grateful to my family, who understands how important this is to me and lets me sacrifice some of my good hours to keep this going. Yeah, grateful. Rest assured, we aren't slowing down. Thanks for listening. And now, on to the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm Byron O'Neill, your host for today's Comics Creator Chat, and I'm welcomed by a new guest on the show today, Murewa Ayodele. He's a rising writing star in the medium with 2023's I Am Iron Man and the Oni Press series AKOGUN Brutalizer of the Gods with artist and friend Dotun Akande, hitting stores and pull lists right now, including my own. I'm really enjoying that series. And this October, he will be writing everyone's favorite Elemental Mutant Storm, a solo ongoing series with artist Lucas Wernick for Marvel that launches the X-Men franchise as a part of the larger From the Ashes storyline. I'm going to do my best here, okay? So Murewa is a Ikabo Bawani o Sewa. So welcome, and how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very good. You got that very correct. You got that right.
Yes. Okay, I bet you didn't expect that. Like, I know.
I didn't expect it.
Yeah, I had to polish up on it. Like, I know a little bit of Yoruba, just a little bit from like my university days. Like, I might be able to find a bathroom, but like one of my degrees is anthropology, and I took several African religions and cultural classes when I was there. And I was supposed to go to Nigeria, and then I broke my tibia. I was going to do like a summer, like a residence there in Lagos. So I missed the trip, but I've been to Nigeria several times, like working concerts and stuff throughout the years. So I absolutely love the country. It's a beautiful country, beautiful people. So
That's nice to hear. Thank you. So I'm among family, basically.
Yeah, well, I'm trying. I do my best. um, so I'd actually like to kind of start with Nigeria and its comics footprint. You know, we've had other African comics creators on the show. I've talked to Isaac Mohajani chatting about Land of the Living Gods with Aftershock. And my co-host Jimmy recently interviewed Juniba, you know, whose work I
Geneva,
adore.
yeah.
Yeah, I actually just finished Mobilis. But I don't really have a great perspective on what a regional footprint looks like there. You know, like what kids are growing up with these days. You know, we have kind of our American superhero tradition, and Europe has like Tintin and Asterix. Japan gave us manga. You know, what does the scene look like there?
It's changed over the years,
Okay,
but when I was growing up, the most popular comic book where you could get basically anywhere, usually petrol stations, banks, not comic shops. There are no comic shops basically. And you won't find them in bookshops too, but petrol stations, restaurants, banks. You could find
okay,
this book called Super Strikers. It's basically um, a comic book series. It's episodic. Every issue is a standalone about soccer players,
okay,
and it's really really fun. A lot of people loved and enjoyed it. I I didn't start out as a soccer fan. I I loved soccer for a little while as a teenager, but then the love kind of died off a little. So, but I know a lot of friends, they love it. Everybody knows that. So that was very, very popular in Nigeria and also here in a lot of other African countries and South American countries. It sells millions of copies per issue.
okay. I'll have to check that out. And you don't have to call it soccer. You don't have to Americanize it. I know it is football. I love the sport, so it's all good if you say football, like the rest of the world does. Well, is that kind of what you grew up with? You know, finding whatever you could in, you know, a gas station or whatever, you know, kind of what heavily influenced your comics DNA?
uh, I I think this is also the same thing in some other countries, even like in the US. You know, things like comic books and movies, they are easy to access when you're living in a city. But when you're living in a very small town, then it becomes less accessible to watch. Maybe I think Rob Liefeld was saying, I think he'd have to go to a comic con to watch a movie. His dad had to drive him out of town, so something like that. So I live in a very small town called Oshogbo in Osun State in Nigeria. So I didn't really have access to that. Growing up, I think I only had a few DVDs of like classic Disney movies like Cinderella and Snow White. So I didn't really have access to cartoons. I didn't have access to comic books. But and at that time, I was born with an art deformity, so I
Okay.
was always a very sick child. And it took a while before my parents knew. They thought I was misbehaving a lot, so they just thought I was a problem child. And it was years later that the doctor now said he's probably misbehaving because he's uncomfortable. He's constantly uncomfortable. The oxygen in his blood is not always sufficient. So I play hard, and it's always just very strange.
Okay.
So my parents were also saving money to be able to have the surgery so they can take me to have the surgery for my heart. And the procedure is not done in Nigeria. The closest place they could get was Ghana, and but the best place that the doctor suggested was in Israel. So they were kind of struggling for money because of that. They eventually couldn't afford it. The government had to step in. So, but after that, that was when I was 4 years old. So I think at around 7, they were more comfortable. They were getting promotions in their works, and we could finally afford cable.
Okay.
And at that time, it was called DSTV. So Cartoon Network was like my first introduction to anything illustrated. So I was like, and I immediately fell in love with Genji Tartakovsky's Samurai Jack.
Yeah.
I loved Samurai Jack so much. I was always watching it all night long, and that kind of got my interest in animation, in drawing, in coloring. So I started experimenting and playing around with a lot of things, trying to draw my own comic, color some coloring books. And later I discovered superheroes. And I'm not sure how. I learned that they came from comics first before they were adapted to this animation stuff. So I had a rough idea of what comics were. So,
Okay.
and very quickly, there's now a superhero comic that was very popular at that time too, that now got introduced because a lot of people are now watching these cartoons. It's called Indomitables.
Okay.
I'm sure you know. I think it's a Malaysian noodle company called Indomie.
Hmm.
So yeah, they're very popular here. That's basically the household noodles everybody eats. So just to further like children love it the most. Adults didn't like it. Adults thought noodles were made from strange chemicals.
Okay.
So it's like, this is bad for you. You shouldn't eat stuff like that. So only kids kind of like them. So in an attempt to market to kids, they started this comics called Indomitables. And they were basically like Fantastic Four ripoffs. But it was a little fun. And bit by bit, I when I left secondary school and I got to the university, that's when I met guys that knew how to access this comics because there was no physical comic. I could not get access to them. So, but when
Right.
I went to the university, that's when I met guys that had like tons of like digital files. They're probably pirated, by the way. A lot of digital files on their laptops. And I'm like, yes, finally. So that's when I got into Batman comics, Iron Man comics. Those are what started me off on that love of comics. And very quickly, I started writing my own, trying to ask Dotun to join me because he was a much better artist than I was. I was terrible at it. I can't draw to save my life anymore. So I would beg him, please illustrate some of these things, but he always said no because we were both like failing in our courses. So
Yeah.
and he was like, I still want to graduate. I still want to graduate at the right time. So please, after we're done with school, I'll help out with this. So but I was just always writing. I'd given up on having the grades my parents wanted. So yeah, that's my journey into comics. It started later, but it's mostly because of accessibility.
Okay. Yeah. Well, similar dissimilar story. Like I dropped out of school, getting my anthropology degree, and I dropped out of school to go work with rock bands. So like I feel what you're talking about with that like pull to do something different. You were in computer programming, is that right?
Yeah, computer science, yes.
Okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I can see kind of talking about some of those influences, kind of the a clear blueprint then, especially with the Samurai Jack, in Akogun, which is hitting stores now.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I picked up the first two issues. They're fantastic. I know the obvious analog here would be, like something similar like a Black Conan, right? But
Yeah.
there's way more nuance than that kind of generalization describes, among other things. It's got a real cosmic flavor and a mythology to it, more than just a typical wandering adventure type book. I got Beowulf kind of vibes from it. So talk to me about, what you and Dotun were thinking about when you sort of developed that story.
Yeah. When we started comic books in Nigeria, we started with like science fiction stories. Because we were deeply connected to like the backstage things happening in the US about how a lot of people were fighting diversity in comics and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And we wanted to kind of like replicate our own here that, yeah, even though we're predominantly black here, there are white immigrants, there are Asian immigrants. So we started trying to tell like futuristic stories where I think maybe for the first time there's like an Indian commissioner in Lagos, and we're telling some of these stories, and we saw that the market here was also connected to the US, but in a different way. In a different way, where while the US was trying to promote the minorities, like Black people,
Hmm.
we're trying to do the same here, even though we were not the minority here. So it
Okay.
was all about, yeah, having Black faces and stuff like that. And that kind of affected how our work was being accepted. There were some awards that for you to get nominated, your protagonist has to be a Black character.
Okay.
And we found out very, very strange. Like I could be telling stories about like talking animals, so I won't qualify for the award, so stuff like that. So, and we got upset and we're like, we were being very prideful about it. So like, see, we're so good. If we should leave this sci-fi thing and come to tell like these African stories about gods, I'm going to be better at it than you are. You you guys are city folks. You live
Right.
in Lagos. You've not seen any of these things. I live in the hub of an Orisha called Oshun. There's an Orisha called Oshun. I live in Oshun State. Like, I see these things every day. I know about these gods. I know about these things. I speak Yoruba better than any of you. If we are to go, if we are to go into this, I'm going to kick your asses, So
Yeah.
so I got angry about it. So started telling like a lot of Orisha stories, and immediately they kind of picked up. And we Action Lab noticed some of our work in New Men. That was the superhero stuff. We worked on that, and we now did something called My Grandfather Was a God. Sorry, it's a long story. That's something
No, it's
called My
okay.
Grandfather
That's
Was a
great.
God,
I'm asking. I want to know.
which was it's a free comic on Webtoons.
Yeah.
And even though the readership is about 1,200 per episode, it comes from a diverse locations. There are people from the UK, people from Nigeria, people from South America, because these gods are worshipped there in South America. They really, really love this comic. They loved it a lot. That was the comic that Tom Brevoort read, that he asked us to come on board to work on Moon Knight. Moon Knight's
Okay.
Black, White, and Blood. So
Yeah.
we've always been in like this zone. So after I Am Iron Man, Oni Press reached out to us, and what we wanted to pitch was an African story. But before we could talk, um, they basically said, gave us a pitch of, okay, can you guys do Black Conan?
Mhm.
And we felt a little offended, like, say African Conan. It feels weird. Say it's Black Conan. So
Okay.
like we're like, yeah, that's basically what we've been working on already. So Dotun and I came together, and we tried to analyze it, not trying to make Conan African, but what is what's the equivalent of a Conan story here in Africa?
Okay.
Because we have sword and sorcery stories too that are in our folk tales. So what's the equivalent? And the equivalent was hunter stories. There are hardly any stories about warriors here. We tell stories about hunters, because
Right.
warriors stay put until there's time for war, and they go in masses. So there aren't really adventures. But the hunter goes where no man has gone before, goes to forests that there are spirits and beasts and creatures that have weird screams that nobody knows what creature must be making this sound. They're the ones that see the things that eyes are not supposed to see.
Right.
That's how it's described. So we're like, okay, our protagonist wouldn't be a warrior like Conan. He would be a hunter. So and then we started playing with Yoruba mythology. There are like two popular mythologies about how the world was discovered/created. And the first one is Obatala, a drunk god,
Yeah.
a god that is fond of drinking. Yeah, came to Earth, and the Earth was mostly water, and did all the creation story things. And there's another one where it's like the gods were looking for a place to go to, and only one god could lead the way, and the god was the god of war. And basically, because he had metal, he could destroy anything that was in the way. And we found it very strange that the, these two stories are very weird. They are unusual. We hear a lot of stories about creation myths. These ones are unusual. Number one, a drunk god, and number two, a war god. War
Yeah.
gods are not usually the gods that start creation. So I was like, okay, what if those two stories are the same story? What would bring a war god over? What if the drunk god was a criminal god too? So, and that's where the story began. So, a mix of our comic book history, trying to trying to one up competitors in Nigeria and the Yoruba mythology and everything mixed together. And I like to watch a lot of old Samurai Jack episodes and Primal on Adult Swim, both by Gen Tarkovsky, just to get in the Berserker mood.
Okay. Yeah. I really enjoyed the creation myth adaptation, because I'm a an anthro major. My focus was in specifically Native American mythologies, but mythologies are something that I pay a lot of attention to. So I really like the way you did that with the drunken god minus the chicken, because I don't know how you would have fit the chicken in there.
Yes, yes.
I was like, that was so well done.
Like
So
chicken
the
spills and they
chicken,
were like weird stuff. I'm like,
yeah.
so we're
It was a
like, let's take that out.
Yeah, climbing down the rope with the was it a snail shell? The sand and a
Yes,
snail
the
shell
sand
drops.
sand came from the snail shell. Yeah, then chicken
Yeah,
spreads it, and
right,
then
right.
palm seed and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the in my read through, what the thing that really stuck out there, and you touched upon that, was a hunter as opposed to more of like a warrior, right? Because you do get the opportunity to explore isolation in a different way, in turn kind of a hero's journey with a different lens, because it allows you to bring out these introspective moments and these moments of self analysis that a hero will never get, because they're in the mix of the fray and can't be seen to be weak and like all these different things. So you get a much broader range of the human emotive experience, and I really enjoyed that about the story. It was really cool.
Yes, yes, because Conan has to be surrounded by warriors and hot chicks.
Right.
But when you are, but I think there's even a Yoruba adage that shows even though hunters are respected, they are also feared. There's this parable that basically says a hunter that is so powerful, that is so good, that could use his heart, throw it, and kill an elephant will only be celebrated for a day. Basically, if you're so powerful, you could kill an elephant with a heart. After people celebrate how powerful you are, they become scared. That means
Okay.
if you should just get angry or anything, maybe just by a slight wave of your hand, you've killed thousands of people. So there's also this fear of them too, because they are the ones that face this powerful beast in the forest. They are the ones that explore the unknown. So there's always this fear of them as well.
Okay. Well, narratively, in and of itself, the cadence of the book is really interesting. I have a background, working with musicians, so I have this tendency to see that kind of storytelling as lyrical. It makes sense to me as like a fable, with a verbal storytelling route, sung around the fire, something like that. So you have these, multiple chapter breaks in a single issue without kind of a singular ending crescendo, if you will. Is that a
Yes.
byproduct of you working in this sort of more loose style narratively, with the script, or generally, or is it something more adapted to this project?
It's a combination of many things. And
Okay.
when it comes to me, some of it are usually like linked to grudges I have against some people. So uh, there was a time where someone wanted to create some comics. I was supposed to work with him. So wanted to create like a series of web comics.
Yeah.
So and we're planning to like produce 5 pages each. So when you read comics, you get 5 pages per week, as and
Okay.
you read them. So that was also supposed to be on the platform,
Okay.
and it didn't pay, and some strange arguments started. They wanted 100% of the rights and stuff like that. So we're like, okay, you know what? We're not working with you anymore. So we took those comics and we pitched it everywhere, everywhere in Nigeria, in Africa, in America, everything. Everybody basically said no. And there was this publisher, which I would not name, because I want people to be able to give feedback to other people that pitch as well. Is they said the story doesn't work because there's there there's no crescendo because it ends so shortly every time. Basically, they didn't like the fact that there were chapter breaks. they felt that it was impeding the flow of the story.
Okay.
And that felt strange to me because there are collection of short stories. You have people that put web comics into, like, why that shouldn't impede the enjoyment of a story. And then there was this comic called Absolute Carnage by Donny
Yep.
Cates.
Yep.
And the first issue were broken down into chapters. And I'm like, see, Donny Cates did it. It worked. Why? Why? So when Oni said they really wanted something oversized for this comic, like they don't want the typical 20 pages, they want like 40-page chapters. They're like, you know what? I'm going to do that for this project because I think it works for this project. And I just want to prove those guys wrong that you can do stuff like this and make it work. And I was happy when I got reviews that kind of reflected why I think it's such a good idea. It's you have in an issue, you basically have 3 last pages. You have 3 cliffhangers. And you have 3 puzzle pieces where you get to have fun and put the story together your own way. Like, oh yeah, and just have like cool titles in the middle, like in issue 2 where you have chapter breaks like called Greedy God, and Obatala makes no mistakes, So different cool titles like that, and yeah, I liked the outcome, and that's why I came up with that format, basically.
Okay. I love this. You are pushing the medium and you are trying to prove people wrong and you are hungry. Like I love this so much. I love people who try to do different things. I don't know if you have read or been exposed to Bear Pirate Viking Queen yet.
I've heard about it, but I've not been able to get to it yet.
Okay. Yeah.
It
And
sounds very exciting. You have been saying it's been awesome.
yeah, they're really pushing the envelope with all kinds of different things. So I love people who are pushing the medium. But you know the word choices there reinforce kind of this timelessness in the narrative. For instance, you have prose that feels like it was written a long time ago, like maybe Edgar Rice Burroughs, something or similar, like under the moonlight its steel hard skin turns invisible, it's demonized forever prowl for unsuspecting eyes. So in most cases in modern comics, less tends to be more, and exposition would have been edited out in favor of a cleaner presentation. But here it works, and it actually feels necessary. I listened to your chat recently with David Harper, which is a very good one that people should check out if they've missed it. And he pointed out, that computer programming background, and you kind of went into this. I think it's an unlimited scroll, the way you kind of visualize a
Yes,
narrative.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I knew how to program in 3 languages when I graduated high school myself, and I think most people think that programmers' brains must be very analytical, but mine isn't at all. It's very abstract, and I constantly think in pictures. I hate words, right? Because they just feel restrict. They feel so restrictive.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm rambling a bit, but it's something in that interview I thought was fascinating about scripting was that unlimited panel. So tell me more about that and how you work on editing this specifically and those inclusions of like making sure there's all these really fine touches that I really enjoy. Like even the word bubble choices create these beautiful zags. There's a curve to them. That you
Yes.
just don't see that kind of thoughtfulness all the time. So yeah.
Okay, I think these are like 3 questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
gave you a lot. My bad.
Yeah. So let me see if I can remember everything, and if I forget anything, just feel free to
Of
call me
course.
back. Yeah. And growing up, I think I'm not sure how it's done in America, but in Nigeria, there's like something called like junior secondary schools, like junior high school.
Yeah.
So there they teach you all the courses, like science stuff, social science stuff, and humanity stuff. And then you get to senior high school, like senior secondary school, senior high school, and you are forced to either pick social sciences or call business sciences, um, science class, and then art class, which is basically humanities. And my parents were so shocked that I went to sciences. Everybody in the family was shocked. Like I went to like, you talk a lot, you express yourself a lot, you are very artistic. Why not choose the arts and
Hmm.
humanities?
Sure.
And that's always I've been someone like that. There's always
Okay.
been this balance of arts and sciences, yes, basically those two. And when I was in science class too, my mom got very angry when I dropped a course to pick up literature from the arts department, and she had to come to school and say, Stop him from going to that class, because it's going to affect how I get into university, because I won't have enough science courses to get
Right.
into computer science." So stuff like that. So I think being analytical and creative, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. They can go together. And I tend to analyze a lot in when it comes to, like, I'll read other people's comic and I analyze them. And when you talked about narration, it's when I was reading books about writing, there was one thing they kept saying, like, narration is like this bad thing that ruins your stories, because it's basically exposition. And in cinema scenes, this YouTube channel, like the first scene he always gives a movie is narrating, and stuff like that. And I hear a lot of writers talking about narration is bad, it's lazy, you are saying what we are seeing, and strange
Right.
things like that. So I I s- I kind of stopped it in my own writing too, because I felt, oh, it was bad. But I was like, I read Sin City by Frank Miller. It's heavily narrated. It kind of works. But I deleted it from my brain. Like, like as though Sin City did not exist. Okay, let's follow the rules. And then I discovered Ed Brubaker. And I'm like, this guy hardly has dialogue in some of his comics. It's
Yeah.
all narrated and it works. Why does it work? And then I discovered Jason Aaron. And I'm like, it works too. So I was experimenting with it, but I still didn't, like, devoid myself of that rule against narration. And then Donny Cates comes up, and it's like, oh my, this guy even takes narration to an whole new level. You have like Ed Brubaker, Jason Aaron, Donny Cates. Like, now it's not like a fluke, it's not like an exception. Now you have like this large number of people that have made their careers almost narrating the story to you.
Mhm.
And like Frank Miller, Ed Brubaker, Jason Aaron, Donny Cates. And we're like, okay, let's analyze this. Why does narration work in some comics and it doesn't work in some comics? And I had to do like this serious breakdown. And it's all about, there are some things that help you perceive the story that, yes, don't say what you see, but there are so many things that you don't see that I can still tell you. And you see that in terms of Frank Miller, like Sin City. It might tell you how the air smells like. You can't see it. And if a character suddenly says the air smells like this, it just feels strange. But in narration, it kind of works. And I started learning it and stuff like that. And my dad is also a pastor, so I came
Okay.
from Christian background and there's this Bible version called the King James version where they
Mhm.
talk in like this old English and stuff like that. So there was that also there, and just mixing everything up together, and I was able to like pick one or two things from everywhere and try to like get. That's where this narration style was birthed from. That's where I was able to like. It's a mixture of so many random things elsewhere that I'm put together, and so that's basically the answer to everything. Is I tend to analyze things. When I was working in the vertical scroll webtoons, I had to read a lot of stuff. Why does this work in vertical scroll but it doesn't work in flip books? Why does this work in flip books but not in vertical scroll? There are so many fun things you can do in vertical scroll that people don't know. Like, one single panel can have multiple layers of information as you scroll. So you can have reviews in like the bottom half of the same panel. So you can have like a serene scene in the sky, but as you scroll, you see that there's been a massacre down below. You might not be able to have that on a comic book, because if you open it, you've seen all the page, you've seen everything. So,
Right.
and there's also no page turn reveal like you see on where you have this big image and you can see all at once. So those are basically, it's basically from constant analysis and discussions. Sometimes I call my friend Dotun and I'm like, I read this comic book. It's not good. It's not bad. Why? Why is it not working? And we discuss it, we analyze it, and we're like, oh, the reason why it doesn't work is because he did everything right, but it's milk toast. Storytelling is usually a world of extremes.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not it's not badass enough if a woman cheats with someone just in her mind or something. Let's take it to an extra level. Let's make the cheating extremely disgusting in the sense that, oh, he does it on their matrimonial bed while he was sick in the hospital. Let's
Oh,
take it to,
okay.
like, oh my god, that's
She's terrible.
terrible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what makes those things really stand out to you, and you remember those for a lifetime. So it's through analysis, constant analysis of stories by other people, because it's hard to analyze your own stuff.
Yeah.
So you try to analyze other people's stuff to kind of improve yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's still the
Absolutely.
computer science thing happening, because in computer science, it's basically analyze it, troubleshoot it, break it down to its components,
Yep.
then find a way to represent those blocks of understandings into blocks of codes, and then you have a system. So like, why does this work? That's always the question. Why does this work? How can I incorporate it into my arsenal?
All right, let's take a quick break. Hey, comics fam. Indie comic book publisher Band of Bars just got a level up and announced it is now a cooperative. This heralds a new era for them, including a partnership with Dauntless Stories. And they added several new members to the ownership group. Marcus Jimenez is now Chief Operating Officer, Brent Fisher takes on the role of Chief Diversity Officer, and Joey Galvez is introduced as Head of Kickstarter Ops and Social Media Manager, which is sure to increase their capabilities overall as a publisher. And it further promotes their mission statement of advancing representation, inclusion, and diversity in the media. They also established a new board of directors to help chart the new path of their journey. With new projects in the works like Alas Goodbye dropping in June, Unbroken soon launching on Kickstarter, and Pawn coming up with Dauntless, stay tuned to this space for more exciting news from the growing Bards family. Let's get back to the show. One of the things I really loved about the mythological presentation here is there's a very familiar link between the flawed nature of the gods and kind of the Yoruba pantheon and the Greek ones that are so pervasive in
Yes.
Western culture, right? So I'm curious about, we already talked about the drunken god creating the world, but was there anything that you and Dotun were concerned about, in terms of portraying any of them in this non-traditional way? If your dad's a pastor, you gotta play it pretty close, right? You don't want to make him mad.
Yeah.
I grew up in the
yes.
church too, so.
So yeah, they are like, yeah, very correct. There are two things to it. Like, even in my family, I think my brother, he got worried a lot. He was always saying that this one that you're telling stories about these gods, have you started worshiping them? Are you going? And I've not been going to church like that. So it's always like, yeah, go to church to cleanse yourself from all these demon things you've been writing about and stuff like that. So yes, there's that. So there's a limitation to even things I can say. I know Dotun might not want me to say this, but Dotun is in a relationship now where the mother of the girlfriend was very scared because of the books he was working on with me.
Oh wow!
Because
Okay.
they were these Orisha gods and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
there's that part. Then the other part is, compared to like some other mythology, these gods are still being worshipped till date.
Yeah.
So there was this fear of, if you misrepresent a god or if people get angry, like, it's not about somebody throwing tantrums online. People actually can reach out to you and, yeah. So
yeah, exactly.
so yeah, so it's real. So but we try to be creative as much as possible and to be respectful, but at the same time, Dotun and I have like something we said we would always say if people challenge us about this. So if anything happens, we know what to say and stuff like that. So yeah, there's that, but yeah. But the reason why we're not too worried is that in like Judeo-Christian religion, it's about God is perfect,
Yep.
and same thing in also Islamic. So if you write a story that portrays the perfect God as imperfect, there's a problem. But in Yoruba religion, the gods are not, and that's the point. In fact, that's why you pray to them. That's why you try to soothe them. That's why you have like things, sweet words you have to say to them so that they might be biased towards you positively. So it's one of the stories of Ogun, for example, the god of war, is that he got so freaking angry one day. So freaking angry, he killed the enemy and killed his own men too. Like, yes, yes.
He was pissed.
Yeah, so it's that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Yoruba. So I don't think there's also the expectation to portray them as flawless.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. The analog is Greek, so it makes so much
Yeah.
sense. It's just really interesting when we have that Western cultural overlay that I'm coming with, where just like you mentioned it, God is perfect, God is everything, and without those fallibilities, it's just so much more approachable, it's so much more reachable in this fashion. Um, and I don't want to stay too much in the weeds in terms of process, but I did read about how Nigerian playwright and novelist Wole Soyinka, yes,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, he's a Nobel Prize winner, and he had an influence on the book. I was a technical theater director and spent time on the road doing Broadway stuff, and I've seen a couple of his plays actually a long, long, long time ago, adapted into like small black box. And I did some research for this, and I had no idea he was honestly related to Fela Kuti as well. But I
Yes,
can
I found out
see,
recently too. Yes.
yeah, I was like that's really cool. Um, and on my read through, I can see kind of the parallel between the protagonist having everything taken from them and Wole's imprisonment for criticizing the political elites. So could you just kind of expand on how his work influenced Akogun and, kind of more broadly you?
um, I mostly said that to like make the work sound more high class. I've
I
read
can
like
edit. I can cut this one if it's a
no,
bad
you
one.
can leave it. Like leave it. It's pride. You can leave it. Like
Okay,
we
that's
do all
awesome.
these things. Yeah.
Okay,
So I've read like very little of Wale Soyinka's work. Very very little.
okay,
And what I like about his work is basically the complexity and the tone. There's this dark serious tone to his work, and Ogun has also been a protagonist in one of his story. And its complexity. Like it's said here that, oh, you don't read like Wale Soyinka stuff if you're an illiterate. Like you have to be like real learned and patient to be able to pick his work. And we kind of Dotun and I kind of suffered from that on our work, because when people see our books and see these difficult to pronounce names, they automatically just assume we're diversity hires. Like some people say, like, oh yeah, they just put them on the work because they have weird sounding names. And if you read our work without that patience, without the understanding that, oh, maybe they are competent, you would assume that our work isn't, because you just read as surface value. Like like a lot of people, for example, just read the words, they don't even look at the images. And the images are very important to us. Like if you see like my script, for example, they are very like precise things. Just the way you will read Watchmen, about there's so many visuals that you have to see in Watchmen. Like noticing that in the first couple of scenes, you already see Rorschach without his mask before he's revealed later. Stuff like that. That's what we put in our stories. Repeated and cyclical imagery and stuff like that. So we want people to be able to like pay close attention. Like we're not saying we're like gods, like we're like these people that can't write a bad story, but it's always very strange when it hurts when you get a bad review, but it's a bad review based on you just didn't read it. Like for example, I think there was a review I got once. Like, I take reviews just like a computer scientist, by the way. I analyze them. Like, I don't feel like hurt by them. I just analyze them. But sometimes you're like, I wish you were calmer with this book. So, for example, there's this thing I do in my writing where there's a little opening scene, and then you have like the title slash credits page, then the story, just like a TV show, the teaser before the thing. And there's a reviewer that he probably thought those first couple of pages were ads or something. So he started after the teaser, and he was criticizing the story that why would it start that way? And I was like, because there are a couple of pages there. Was like the story just starts with Iron Man underwater. How did he get there? What's the story behind it? And I'm like, there are like 3 pages before that. Because in a lot of Marvel books, the story starts after the credits page. But in my books, even for Marvel, there's always a story before the credits page. Even in short stories, we kind of do that. There's always a story, a little story before the credits page. So, and I was like, man. So we have to like say some of these things just so that calm down, read our stories the way you would read a Wale Soyinka's work, a distant stuff. And I promise you, there's a lot of depth and thought put into these pages. They are not just hastily put together pages. So yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
mean
why I
it's a
asked that comparison stuff. Yeah.
okay, yeah. It's a big personal beef of mine when people are immediately out to criticize. And I hate that about comics fandom and in the community. It drives me absolutely nuts. There are things I don't like. I don't go to great lengths to preach about how much I don't like them, right? I leave it
Mm.
be. It's not for me. And that's okay. I mean that's just my personal perspective, but people are putting their heart and soul into their work, and it's just heartbreaking to see if they go to read their reviews. And I know a lot of people who just simply won't do it. Because it's just so soul crushing, but it just really bothers me, because it's hard. Art is hard, and we don't need to have people who are intrinsically supportive of the community, who are spending dollars to support it, to simultaneously just create a culture of trying to break it down and break people who are trying to create down. It's really
Yeah,
weird.
like even if you would do it, be accurate. Like, I'm not a lot of creators hate criticisms. And like I said, because I'm coming from a computer science background, like I'm going to bring out a product. There's a better version. That's how apps work. They are begging you to give them bad reviews. Tell me what's wrong so I can fix it.
Right.
So, but the problem that I have with some reviewers is not the bad review. Feel free to insult me, go personal if you want, but at least be accurate. If you're accurate, I can learn and improve. So that kind of thing. And also, by being inaccurate, so you've also led some people away from the book, even though that's not really the truth about it. So imagine someone says, because for example, there's this thing that gets me angry from some Nigerian reviewers when they review Marvel movies. There are some that think Thor is not a real mythological character.
What?
They think Marvel saw Shango and stole the idea of Shango and, and made him Thor. And because I know both mythologies, I know that yes, they are very similar in a very strange way. One has like a short armor, the other has a short axe, both double-headed kind of hammers and axes. They both control lightning. They are both fierce warriors. I'm like, yes, I know they're very, very similar, but trust me, it's another mythology. They didn't take it from Shango. So imagine someone now wants to like give a review of AKOGUN and says, "Oh, they stole Thor and made him black and called him Shango in this car." A lot of people are like, they've ruined the story and they just don't read it. But that's not what happened. You get so that's my only issue. Like, you can give a bad review, but don't be wrong. Like, just
So
try to be as accurate as you can.
Yeah, I mean the prose nature of Akogun, I really enjoyed, but I can see how for certain people, that may not be there for them. And that's fine, but it's very purposeful and methodical as to its inclusion and why it's there, so
Mm.
acknowledge that. And then it's fine. If you don't like it, okay, cool. You don't like it. Not
Yeah.
everything's for you. It doesn't have to be. Not
Yes.
everything's written for me. So
Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So have you gotten a whole lot of that? Like, oh, it's just a diversity hire. Like I'm thinking about Storm,
Oh,
obviously.
um, ah, okay. In creator-owned work, you don't get much of that. People just don't read the book.
Right.
But in Moon Knight, Black, White, and Blood, I didn't get that.
Okay.
I didn't get that. I'm not sure why. I think people bought the book because of Ickman. So, because the issue, people bought because of Ickman, and for some reason, we even got like the better reviews of all the three stories. We got the best review of the three stories. So that didn't come up. In Iron Man, I think it came up like twice. It's not much. It's not like I'm going out looking for them. I mostly read reviews, like I said, to analyze them. What am I
Mhm.
doing wrong? How can I improve?
Yeah.
So the only reviews that have been like completely useless were like there's one that just said, "Oh yeah, give Iron Man to the diversity hire." So there was that one, and there was another one who said he felt like tearing the book into pieces, into shreds, blah 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 blah. But the reason why I wasn't upset with that was because someone in the video said, "Wow, you hate it that much. That means I'm going to buy the book." So I was like, "Yeah, well, he convinced someone to buy it, so I'm not upset."
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Take it all the way to the bank, right?
mhm. So for Storm, I've not been getting that because I think people are more wary of being called racist too. So they're
Okay.
just like, yeah, Storm, they'll cancel it in like 2 issues, blah, 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 blah. That's the only thing. But mostly everybody has been like super excited. Like the Iron Man fans loved Iron Man to a fault. Like they
Yeah.
still like chat me up and stuff like that. Storm fans are here. Like the book is not even out yet, and I already feel like family. They're like really supporting the book, pushing the book. So people have like pre-order like 25 copies each, saying that they're going to
Whoa.
give everybody they know and stuff like that. And I try to give like a little hint on what to expect. So people are really loving that, getting new followers by the day. So it's been overall positive. It's been overall positive. The, it's the only problem. I don't even think it's racism. There's this thing that it's perfectly normal. It's just when you're a creator, it might hurt, but it's perfectly normal. The thing about the comic book industry is this: it happens in other industries too, music, movies, but
Yeah.
stronger in comic book industry. It's when you are a newcomer, people don't give you the benefit of the doubt, and yeah, I think it's perfectly normal. So it's you can see it in music. Someone has never made a song before, but the song is good. A lot of people can admit, yes, this song is good. A movie, someone has never directed a movie before. Get Out is like the first movie um Jordan Peele would direct. I'd be like, yeah, it's good. But in comics, for some weird reason, if you don't have backlog and the book is good, they don't even say a lot of people don't admit it's good. They don't even talk about it. They don't even so there's that. So it's until you have backlog. Once you've made comics in the past, that's when they're like, that's when they can easily admit that yeah, you are good. In fact, if you even write a bad story, they'll say that he's done good works in the past. We'll let him go. We'll forgive him for this bad one. But if it's your first and it's bad, like it's like this unforgivable sin, like yeah, you are done. You
Right.
are
Right.
done.
Right. Yeah.
So I know that with time, those things will like die off because I'm getting more backlog. Like now I can say, oh, minus the stuff I've done in Nigeria, I've published like maybe like 4 to 5 comic books in the US. So there's like this trust. A lot of Storm fans or X-Men fans wanted to like see if I was good or there was this doubt. But when they went to read I Am, they're like, oh yeah, this guy can write. So that's that's the benefit. So as you have more in your backlog, you are forgiving easier and they are less. So that's just it basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Like if,
I
if,
get
if
that
an artist is
completely.
just starting out, Yeah, so like if an artist for just starting out now, people don't say, oh, his art style. People just say, oh yeah, he's a bad artist. But if
Sure.
you've drawn a lot of comics, people now say, oh yeah, that's his art style. Like, you have like artists that are like very popular now that are praised for being the greatest of all time. And like the anatomy is wonky, the perspective is bad, and stuff like that. But people don't talk about it. Just say, "Oh yeah, that's art style. The anatomy is off for a reason," And so that's the comic book industry. While in the movie industry, you might have made like 100 good movies. If you make a bad one, sorry, this is not good. I'm not going to like lie on this review and say it's good. So those are the small differences. We are more forgiving and also more unforgiving. So it's a weird paradox for the comic book industry.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that 100%. Like I have been pretty vocal, not in a bad way, but just when people have asked, like the whole Hickman Krakoa thing was not my thing. Like I recognize all the cool things that were done. I recognize the swing. I'm a huge advocate for big swings in comics. So great, good job. I loved East of West, like just absolutely fantastic. I love the other Hickman stuff, right? So absolutely, I will return to reading Hickman stuff later. But Krakoa wasn't so much for me. So I'm really glad to see the reboot happening. I picked up X-Men last week. Thought it was really, really good. It's a great grounding point. And my first exposure to Aurora was like the Claremont era, and I love the punk phase of Storm in the early 1980s with artist Paul Smith. So kind of what was your first exposure to Storm?
Oh yeah, I think I just wrote the letters page for issue one a couple of while ago. I oddly enough don't remember. It's just
Okay.
strange. It's so yeah, I've Aurora, it's not like other characters where they have like their own series that you can point to. So it's just like from picking her up from osmosis. You get so number one from the movies. The movies were probably like my first exposure because I went to comics when I was in university, which was the 2010s. So
Okay.
from and that was around the time that Marvel 2 was basically almost like reducing their publication of like X-Men stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's from osmosis, maybe a Black Panther book, watch some videos that analyze comics like Comics Explained, um, from the movies, the animated series, so different, and they all came afar sadly that I'm not sure which one I would say came first, but it's a combination of different ones I've had exposures to, and yeah, she's always been this fun, fierce character, but especially in the Krakoan era, I kind of enjoyed some of the directions, especially Al Ewing's own. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, Greg Paxton was also a very good one. They've been different ones, but I'm not sure exactly which one was the my first exposure. It's
Okay.
all combined in a weird way, but it's probably the animated series.
Okay. Well, how did you get pulled into the project from the jump? Like, how do you end up writing Storm exactly?
Um, I think when I was done with I Am Iron Man, someone
Mhm.
asked me online like, what characters would I like to write? And I said Storm.
Okay.
And also when after my grandfather was a god, the webtoons I was
Yeah.
working at when Tom Brevoort reached out before he offered Moon Knight, he asked what characters did I like, and Storm was part of the characters I liked. And one of the reasons why I liked her was not because she was a badass, but because she was also African.
Mhm.
So yes, from Kenya. So I really like that. So I said that, yeah, her and Shuri are like my favorite black women in Marvel.
Okay.
Oro and Shuri, I love them to death. So and in the tweets where I said Storm again, Tom Rivers now replied, noted.
Ah, okay.
So I guess he has always kept it in mind. So when the From the Ashes thing came and I finished with AKOGUN, I reached out to the Marvel Ricky Podding. He's in charge of like managing creative resources. Like, oh yeah, I'm free now if there's anything on ground. So I think he reached out to Tom like, oh yeah, he's free now. He's done with AKOGUN. He was like, yeah, you want to come on board on Storm?
That's awesome.
So
Yeah. So she broke onto the scene in kind of the mid 1970s with giant size X-Men, and an era where
yes,
black superheroes, especially black women, was really rare. So let me drop you a stat here. So I had to look this up. So Storm ranks 8th in the number of comic book appearances with a staggering, blew my mind, over 7,500 comic book appearances. This is ahead of
damn,
Thor. This is ahead of the Hulk. This is ahead of Wonder Woman and Professor X. Absolutely blew my mind. So
he's
you're
been
taking
around.
on, right. You're taking on one of the big heavyweights in the medium and omega level mutant here, right? So as an African, what does it mean to you to be able to add to an African X-Men's character's legacy?
Yeah, like I've said a lot of times, when Marvel reached out, when Tom Rivers reached out, I planned to say no
Okay.
because I was so scared. I was
Yeah,
so
I
scared
get
because,
that.
yeah, because I know how much she means, and I'm like, she even though like she has so many appearances, she hasn't had like her own run that's gone incredibly long. Like even this Ali Ewing's run, it's X-Men Red, it's not Storm.
Right.
And the second longest is Greg Parks, which was just 11 issues. So most of it has been when she has been on the X-Men. She has been in Avengers for a little while. When she was a Wakandan character, when she married T'Challa, when she was on the Fantastic Four, you know, different comics. That's where her appearances has been. She hasn't really had a long run. So I'm like, man, this is going to be a lot of weight. So even when Tom reached out, I was almost like doing things where it would make him get angry and say, you know what, I'll ask someone else. So I'll be like, do I get to pick a costume? Do I get to, I was just, instead of just saying, okay, thank you, let me get back to you. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I was like, can every issue be like 30 pages long? I was just asking weird stuff. So I was basically self-sabotaging it. Yeah. So, and when I was thinking about it, I'm like, ah, man, this is really scary. And I told my sister said, see, number one, you don't have any job right now because you finished AKOGUN and there's no new project. And you're kind of broke too. So even if be a true Nigerian and at least do it for the money.
There you go. That's
And
hilarious.
Dotun came with the more creative one. He said, if you say no to this project, they may ask a quote unquote worse writer to handle this series. And
Mm.
every single issue, you're going to hate yourself and say, I would have come up with something better. And it's like, yeah, why didn't you? You get so like, okay, let's give this a try.
That's a good
So
friend. That's a good friend. Yeah. Yeah.
so I was
Yeah.
like, let's give this a try. Because another another thing why it was also scary was this is also like the first major comic book I would be writing and Dotun is not drawing it.
Right.
So there's also that. And like we've established in this conversation is I'm a very visual storyteller. In I Am Iron Man, there's even no narration. Everything is visual. Dialogue is sparse. It's not Bendis. It's not so it's very, very sparse. So I'm like, what if the artist I'm paired with, because I didn't know it was Lucas then, they hadn't brought Lucas on the project yet. What if the artist can't represent the visual thing? What if he's not a strong visual storyteller? How yeah, I would have to be all those writers that have expositions in their dialogue and all those stuff. I don't know if I'll be able to do that and do that well. So it was very so there was so many layers to the fear. The character is so big. I know what that character means to the black community, to the African community, and this is the first time I'll be working with another artist at Marvel. So it was a lot of layers. So I I did a lot of research. Um, I came up with about I started coming out with episodes, different episodes, because Tom said number one, he wants an interaction between Storm and Doctor Doom.
Okay.
So that's one. Number two, Storm is going to be based in Atlanta.
Yep.
So that, and then three, he wants her in one way or the other, except I have a better idea. He wants in one way or the other where Storm is heavily involved in the politics on the world stage,
Okay.
basically representing mutants. So those are like the three things. So and go. So started crafting the characters I liked from the X-Men, from the one thing I didn't like about a lot of X-Men books, why in if you have to look at books I've read more books in the Avengers office than in Spider office or in X-Men office. And it's because a lot of Avengers office books you can just jump on. There every story does have to be linked to this like long lore of things. Like when I found out that when Stacy had died in the comics, like before I was born, I was surprised. I'm like, and you guys still talk about Gwen Stacy till now, you know? So and X-Men stuff, like they are linked to like things from like during
1960s. Yeah.
yes. So and so many things. But like you can just jump on like other Avengers books, like, oh yeah, just read this Hulk run, just read this Daredevil run, and you don't have to like know anything. Yo, yeah, Kingpin is the big villain again, and you're good, and you read it. So like I didn't need to know anything before jumped on Chips Zdarsky's Daredevil run, stuff like that. I didn't need to know anything before I jumped on Jason Aaron's Thor, but it didn't seem that way in X-Men books, including in the late Krakoan era. It felt like I needed to know a lot of things. So this time I was picking around characters, not just in the X-Men office, but in the Avengers office, in the Spider office. What are the characters I love the most? And
Okay.
what roles do I want them to play? I was doing the analysis thing. What are Storm's strengths and weaknesses? What characters can play with her strength? What characters can play with her weaknesses? Oh, she's connected to this spirit or this entity. What other characters are connected to it? So I had my plots, I had all those character sheets. Okay, so let's start putting the stories together. I wrote an issue one. They're like, okay, it's cool. And I wrote an issue two, like just outlines. Like, okay, cool. Three, like cool. Four, cool. Because I sent it to Dotun as well. And then I wrote five. And Tom said, wait, I think we have something here. I think we have something here. Five is awesome. And Dotun said the same thing. They're like, you know
Okay.
what? Let's make five. Let's make it our issue one. I
Okay.
like this. So so it took a while for me to like get the hang of it. So now five is one, and I'm now moving from there and playing around with all the things Tom told me to play around with, like Atlanta base and everything, and then trying to see how I can make an X-Man, what people that love X-Men, why they love Storm, and the things I love from the Avengers office about those characters, how their stories are very approachable, how they and all those elements. Let me see how I can bring them together and make Storm a compelling X-Men protagonist, but a solo protagonist as well. So this is not like, oh, the story is just going to be focused on Storm, but she's still an X-Man. No, this is Storm. This is Storm as a solo hero. And this is like reading a Daredevil book, a Spider-Man book, a Thor book. That's how it's going to feel. So, and that's how we're moving forward. So that's the plan for this series.
That is awesome. Yeah, I was wondering how much it was going to tie in because I know she's joining the Avengers in, I think it's next month, like August, right?
Yes, August. Yeah,
When
next month.
Jed McGay's, yeah, yeah. So I mean, I'm super excited about it. She's absolutely one of my favorite characters. I'm definitely looking forward to hitting shelves this fall. I'm so glad. I feel like Marvel got the casting right, and you have this great group of editors behind you that it sounds like are working with you, including Dotun. So it's nice to see that his voice is certainly being included in there. So
Yeah, I think Tom can't say it, but I've been feeling that vibe from like his story notes and things that's been saying. I think he's a big fan of Storm, but he's not allowed to say, so it doesn't be like a speaking favorite. But I'm getting a sense of that. I'm getting a sense of that because, like, look at the cover artist on the project. Mateusz Mananini, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, is the cover artist on Gods. Lucas Warneck. When I saw the email he sent to Lucas Warneck to invite him, he's like, this is your chance to like have your print on a big property in Marvel and make it your own. That was like his pitch to Lucas Warneck. And man, Lucas Warneck is drawing some of the best images you've seen, like better than any stuff he's done in the Krakoan era. Anything, it's awesome. It's like it's a little like getting like his marvelous covers as interiors, And it was like, yeah, like I know this colorist, he colors my work best. And Tom is like, yeah, bring him on board, and stuff. So like it's everyone working at like the peak. I'm currently plotting issues 7 to 10
Okay.
because I'm not sure if we get to issue 7 to 10. So like I'm not even allowed to like start working on it, but I really, really want to work on it. And yeah, but I just want to have an idea of how far I've gone. And Tom calls me back and says, that issue 2, I'm thinking this, that. I'm like, he's still in his mind. That's why I know he's a Storm fan. And I was like, okay. So I jumped on the script. We like tweaked those little things again, improved some dialogue and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, let's go. So he sends it to Lucas again, like, okay, yeah, start working on it. So like everyone working on this project is like really excited. Uh, the assistant editor on the project, Annalise Bisa, says she can say it. Says our favorite character is Storm. So there's a lot of love on the project.
I love it. I mean, like you're getting me hype about it. Like just your enthusiasm for the character, and that's what you want to see. You want to see people who are really, really invested, who are recruited to write the characters you love. Nobody can ask for more than that. That is
Yeah.
just hearing all this fills me with a little bit of joy. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. And you have Brutalizer the Gods with Oni, which I've picked up through issue 2. I think issue 3 is set to drop mid-August, right? Is that correct?
I think it's early August or
Okay.
close to mid. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Probably August 6th or August 12th. I'm not sure. I forgot it. I knew it, but I kind of forgot.
Okay. Was that so? I really, really enjoy the long form storytelling of Akogun. So was that a hard transition when you started writing Storm to like, okay, now I'm in Marvel. Now I've got to deal with restrictive number of pages.
Um, yes, that's correct. I just remember that's correct because
Yeah.
I told you like this is like issue 5, issue 1, issue 5. Then is now the issue 1 now.
Right.
And all the issues I was writing like, yeah, I'm going to tell like this character's backstory, his mother, his daughter, and then Storm's story will be going on this route. I was like playing around with all the stuff, and Storm was like, you're kind of making Storm feel like she's a guest star in her own book because there's so many things happening. I was like, okay, let's give this another try. And I said, oh, the first 3 issues are going to be like 30 pages each. And like, sorry, I can only get to 30 pages for issue 1. I'm like, okay. So it took a lot of adjusting to because I really wanted those large number of pages and everything. But Tom helped like put me back in like the Marvel style and
Yeah.
and remember how to write in the Marvel style and not Marvel style as per how to script, but writing for Big Two Comics and remind me of the strengths that I had there and try to use them there and stuff like that. So yeah, it took a lot of adjusting to. Then Tom Rivers also has like this Bible that he has for the entire X-Men books. So and I hope everybody's able to adjust to it because I'm kind of a little familiar with that mode. That's what I did for Iron Man, and some writers might not. Tom is of the group of, oh yeah, every issue can be someone's first comic. So while you're writing this serialized story of this grand epic, each issue should be very, very approachable. Each
Okay.
issue should tell its own self-contained story. And you would see it in some of the books he was editing before. In Moon Knight, every issue in Moon Knight feels like a standalone story. He's also the one editing, is it Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four's every story feels episodic. So he says he has been trying it and has been getting a lot of positive responses. Like Fantastic
Okay.
Four is at issue 29 or so, and it's still going strong. And so he says he wants to have that episodic in nature. And funny enough is I was planning to walk away from that. I wanted to tell more serialized stories because just to prove that I can. I want to also have stories where at the end, at the last page, it's not the end, the next episode. It is to be continued. I want you to have that feeling of, oh my God, I want to see what happens in the next issue. So I have to find a way to balance it where each issue tells its own self-contained story, like Tom wants, and you also have that to be continued. That after the last page, you're like, yeah, let's see what's going to happen. So I've been trying to balance that. I think a lot of the X-Men books in the last pages I've seen, you just see next, then the title of the next page. So far, I think I'm the only one saying the to be continued thing because I loved it from all those old cartoons. Anytime one episodic cartoon wants to go big, then they now tell this epic story and you see it because you're just dying like, oh my God, next week can come soon enough. So I'm trying to do that for this Storm series too. So it's good to tell his
Yeah.
own self-contained stories, but also build up this large story.
I mean, that's the dream. I think that's what a lot of the big two are struggling with right now is how do you get that book written that people leaving their comic book shop want to sit in their car and they just immediately
Yes,
want to crack it before they get home, right? Like I want to
yes,
read it now. So
yes.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I think in the interview that Mark Miller had with some comic shops, they said one thing that Dotun and I were still analyzing last week, talking about the parking lot books, just like you said, like books that, yeah, they buy a lot of books, but there's this book where they can't leave the parking lot; they have to read it before they go. And Dotun and I've been trying to analyze it. We've not cracked the code yet, but we're still trying to analyze like what makes that, and we have a little hint of what it is. So I'll start including them in like issue 6 onwards and hope it works.
Okay. It's funny because I was thinking about in the Discord with my co-host Jimmy and I, they're always we're back and forth. Hey, you interviewed Murewa. What is the synopsis? What is he like as a writer? And I'm going to be like, because he can. That that's how I'm gonna leave that. Right. Um,
That sounds so cool.
yeah, because he
That
can.
dark side is.
Yeah. Well, what else you got cooking that you can talk about? Of course, I know you're really, really busy with Storm, but it sounds like Akogun has more to tell, if unless I'm missing something, right?
um yes. I think if Oni allows us, the last text you will see in Akogun Brutalizer of God is going to tell its own complete story. We're going to see to be continued in Akogun Revenge of the Gods. We're
Okay.
hoping we can have a sequel series for that where we continue to see the stories of Akogun and the gods. But this story will be complete and it's going to be 100 pages in total. So
Okay.
there's that. Oni said they want to have a conversation with us, so we're not sure what it is yet. So maybe it's another book or anything. We're not sure yet, but I think they're still open to working with us again. And that's why I are trying to like take a little break and because I need to take a break because until they see the sales figures of issue 1, they can't greenlight like issue 6 to 10.
Sure.
So we've been having like some Hollywood producers reaching out to us like, oh yeah, this cartoon stuff and stuff like that. And
Nice.
I've been both scared and too lazy to like work on animation script. Scared because I'm like, oh man, what if I can only think in comic books? What if I can't break like the animation code? And because of this, animation that played a bigger role in my childhood than comics did. So there's also like this fear and respect that over respect I have for animation. So I've been too scared, even though I can come up with nice ideas that people say, yeah, it works. Now write the script. Like there's this big producer, probably the biggest producer in animation, that said, write the scripts. And it's been a year. I've not written it. I've been too scared to start. So
Oh,
I'm hoping I could, that's why I will be able to work on that and hope the producer will still be willing to like accept the script after like wasting more than a year on working on it. So
you got this. Animation takes time. Like it's comics and animation are not the same. Like I've talked to a
yeah,
lot of people in animation. It's just you can start to finish with a comic book, in 6 months, especially with the big two. You're knocking stuff out. But animation's like 5 years, 6 years. So you got it.
yeah. For example, like in comics, sometimes I believe that sometimes an editor is not sure even if your script is good or not. But you know what? Let's see it in a comic. And then someone puts comment like, oh yeah, it's good. But in animation, if it's not good in script form, it's not going past that level.
Right.
You need to be able to entertain me at the script level from the first page. So that's why I'm a little hesitant and scared. Like sometimes I might tell an editor that, like, especially on Brevoort, like, are you sure about this? And I'm like, I'm sure. And then Dotun draws it and like, oh yeah, it works. You're correct. Yeah. But animation, you're not going past that level because it's too expensive to prove your concept.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so so that's why I feel like there are lots of like people working it. Okay, like now in the Marvel office, now that I'm in the X-Men office, I get to read other people's scripts. Gail Simone, Jed McKay, everybody's scripts. And I noticed that in the script form, I'll be like, oh yeah, writer A is like way hotter than writer B. And then the final comic comes and I'm like, oh my God, writer B is actually the one that is better. Like, like these stories, but it's because in the script form, you can't see it. Some people are better at making their scripts more interesting. But when you draw what they've described and you see it, you're like, oh, I get it now. Especially people that are playing with a lot of ideas. People playing with a lot of ideas. You can't see it in script, but when it's drawn, you're like, oh, okay. So this guy is supposed to be like related to this guy and all this stuff. So that
Yeah, I
happens.
get it. Yeah, I saw something relatively recently, Marvel book. I'm not going to say when because I don't know if I'm supposed to or not. But I got to see the advance of it. So before everything was completion, so you had a couple issues on that were in script form, and then you had a couple that had editor's notes and everything. It blew my mind. It's so fascinating to see behind the screen and see how things work. And yeah, it's amazing when you really think about all of the facets that make these books that we love. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, where would you like people to find you online these days?
I prefer Twitter because I think so that people ask questions, I can be able to like interact with them and stuff like that. So it's more friendly when it comes to like interaction with readers and people that want to know more about the book compared to like other social media. So just I think it's at Ayodele Murewa. Ayodele Murewa. So
Yeah,
if
I'll
people
put a
have,
link in I'll put the show
yeah,
notes link in there so everybody can find you, no problem. So,
yeah. If
well,
people have
Murewa,
problems like pronouncing Yoruba names, just imagine it as Japanese names. Just pronounce all the vowels and you're good.
okay. Well, I'll give it my shot here, right? So, Eshe Modupe. It's like, so thank you. I
Thank
really
you very much.
appreciate you. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, chatting with me today. I hope I didn't butcher the Yoruba words too much. So
No. They sound awesome. Thank you.
awesome. Yeah, no problem. Well, this is Byron
Thanks for
O'Neill
having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Well, this is Byron O'Neill, and on behalf of us at Comic Book Yeti, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.
This is Byron O'Neill, one of your hosts of the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by Comic Book Yeti. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It lets us know how we're doing, and more importantly, how we can improve. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner, maybe you would enjoy our sister podcast, Into the Comics Cave. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.